Hey, this is Seagrove. Today I'm here with Andrew Wamboldt at Charizard Lounge on Twitter. Put his handle there for you. But he played a deck that I thought was very interesting in Memphis and made day 2 with it. But before we get into that, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then we can get started.
Oh yeah, so I play in St. Louis area and I run the Charizard Lounge.
All right. So for this deck, how did you come to the conclusion that this was the play for St. Louis?
So Zoroark obviously has been super strong. So naturally I want to test Glaceon. And I also played Umbreon quite a bit at the end of last season. And
Okay.
that kind of got ruined for this year just because of Gallade and Guardy and then all the Buzzwole stuff that came out. So you can't really play that anymore.
Right.
But Glaceon's almost the same card, but it's has some things better going for it than Umbreon. So I want to kind of just build that. So initially, the first Glaceon deck I built was Glaceon Zoroark.
Same.
Not with the GX though, but with the BKT
Oh, okay.
Zoroark because Mind Jack combos really well damage-wise with the snipe damage. And like I still had one GX just for draw support, but that ended up just losing too much to like Magnezone and Vikabulu. So I kind of shelved the deck after that and tested Magnezone a bunch, but I just never could get the consistency going too much for that. So I came to the conclusion that Magnezone probably wouldn't do too well. So you still need to beat it as people play it, but the further you get in the tournament, the less Magnezone that should have been there.
Assuming you're doing well.
Yeah. But so since he had to beat Magnezone and beat Vikabulu, I just already had like the Lapras and Aqua Patches in there even with Zoroark, so I just
Okay.
took that stuff out and put in a Garbodor line and put in some more float stones than I had, and that pretty much made it. And then I tested it out some, played some games against Magnezone, and the Garbodor worked at swinging that matchup, and so I felt it was pretty good to go since it was able to take on Magnezone.
Yeah. What matchups out? You said, I think you mentioned in Magnezone, you said Lapras was good. What other matchups is it good in?
Pretty much everything except Vikavolt, just because they can get a Tapu Bulu going and one-hit KO it without giving up energy, and then against Golisopod, it's usually not good,
Yeah.
but like depending on their board state, you can power it up just to have something to one-hit KO with, and then as long as you have Glaceon set up, if they Guzma it up, you don't really care.
Okay. So you mentioned on Twitter that you might drop the multi-switch. What uses did you find for it in preparing for the tournament?
So I originally had 2 multi-switch in the Zoroark build, and so it's a little more like integral just as a energy moving option. So one thing that multi-switches really helped with was just being able to power up more Laprases throughout the game, because you could attack with the Glaceon and then retreat it or Guzma and then multi-switch up energy to it. So it just gave you more options to getting into Lapras. So then the one that was left in there was just kind of a leftover artifact from like a old list, and like the card's okay as a one of, like I definitely used it throughout the day to make some pretty cool moves, but then there's a lot of other times where I just see it in my hand and be like, well, I'm going to discard that with Ultra Ball.
Yeah.
That has no purpose right now.
Okay. With Palpad, what did you find yourself getting back the most?
Pretty much everything except usually not N, but I get Cynthia or Sycamore back. Usually, usually Sycamore's late game, but sometimes you'd hit it mid game where you just had Cynthia's in the discard.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's really good for just stacking your deck full of Guzmos for the end of the game. Like it feels really good when you're attacking with Lapras and you just need a Guzma to win it after your next attack, and you have 3 Guzma back in your deck because you played Pelpad.
Right.
And then same thing with Sycamore, just knowing if you just need to see a few resources, knowing that you might have 3 or 4 Sycamore in deck when your opponent's sending you in the late game. It's
for sure
pretty strong. It just helps you use the good supporters for a given game more throughout that game.
Mm-hmm. I was a bit surprised by the Field Blower. What did you use that for?
So it's just a general removal for Parallel City mainly. And I'd actually look to go up to 2 Field Blower maybe for future builds, just because red side Parallel City can be pretty awkward to work around. And then Fighting Fairy Belt made a pretty big comeback in St. Louis. And while the deck's not too bad with dealing with that stuff with just the 1 Field Blower, having 2 Field Blower would just really help ensure that you're seeing it in those matchups to make sure you're not getting stopped by any of these cards.
Sure. You are obviously trying to get this turn 1 lock, especially if you go first. What percentage of the time did you find yourself getting it?
It's really hard to tell. I got it a lot day 1, but day 2 I started missing it quite a bit and picked up some just unlucky losses. I lost to Zoroark day 2 just as really all 3 games my deck didn't set up, but the second game somehow I managed to win. But I had 2 games where I just never got a Glaceon established within the first 5 or 6 turns, so I just lost.
Okay.
Because when Zoroark can draw a billion cards,
you
can beat everything.
So you mentioned a few changes. You mentioned dropping. Well, I'll let you talk about it. What changes would you make going forward with this list for Charlotte?
So the first thing I dropped was just a multi-switch, just because it's definitely a good power card to have, but it's not something you can rely on too much. So I'd probably look to switch that into the second Field Blower.
Okay.
And then I'd definitely change the Super Rod into a Rescue Stretcher. The Super Rod was kind of an artifact from my old Umbreon build, where you're putting the Darkness energy was back into the deck was more important because you wanted to get that energy back in for foul play with Zoroark Break. But it wasn't very important to be able to put energy back in for this deck. So Rescue Stretcher would have just been a lot better throughout the day for giving you an out to get Lele back if you discard it, or just to give you better access to getting Mewtwo back in the Buzzwall or Espeon matchups. And then I'd take out one of the water energies for a Professor Letter. Something I found throughout the day was sometimes I'd be drawing Aqua Patches but not have any energy in the discard.
Happened to me a lot.
I was thinking back to old Evital lists and during the 2014 season before Compressor was out, people typically played Professor Letter because it let them get the energy for the attachment as well as one to discard, or just grab 2 that you immediately Ultra Ball away and then you attach a DC or something.
Right.
And then a few other changes that I'm not sold on, but I think that are worth considering. You can potentially cut down to 1 Lapras, just because that's typically all you power up
Right.
in a game just because it's so energy intensive. But the advantage of two is, like, if you have one played down and the opponent starts attacking it, you'd have the second one that you can start setting up and just let them sink damage into a useless one. Because if you can attack with, I think it's called Blizzard Burn, whatever its big attack is. If you can attack with that and have no damage on that Lapras and you're ending your opponent late game, especially with Garbotoxin in play, like most decks aren't going to be able to knock it out. So you have like a clean Lapras to work with. That's one of your best comeback options in the deck, because like if you're at 4 prize cards left, you end your opponent to 1 or 2, take a knockout, go down to 2 prizes. A lot of times, like, your opponent will have a Lele or something already damaged, so then, like, Guzma off of that end typically becomes a win condition for you.
Yeah.
And then another change is the Garbodor line might be able to be cut down. I was thinking, like, 2-1 maybe, and then that could just like cutting the Lapras and Garbodor, there's not really like a individual purpose for cutting it for a certain card, but there's like a few different options you can do with it.
Yeah.
You could go for another Professor's Letter to increase the consistency with that. I found when I was missing the turn 1 lock, it wasn't because I was missing the Eevee, because I was whipping the energy for the attachment. You could go Energy Lodo to find DCs a little more easily, or you could do something like Dawnwing's Necrozma and use that for retreating between stuff in matchups where you don't want Garbodor. And I think the Garbodor also shouldn't be looked at as like a pillar of the deck. Like, as soon as the meta swings in a way where Garbodor's not needed, because like Magnezone and Vikavolt aren't seeing play,
Right.
I'd be looking to cut that out immediately for some draw power. And there's 2 directions you can go with that, either Zoroark GX or Octillery. And Zoroark would be good because they give you another attacker in the deck, and there's some synergy with Trade and Aqua Patch. But if other people start playing Glaceon more, could be to your advantage to play Octillery.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be able to use Zoroark in mirror matches. But it's really hard to tell when people are going to stop playing decks like Magnezone or Vikavolt, especially Vikabulu, because it's,
Never
like
gonna
moderate
stop.
success. So
Yeah.
You'd have to really be paying attention and make a really smart meta call to move away from Garbodor with it.
Okay. I saw you in one game. You had a DCE in hand. You had a Glaceon active from your first turn. It was your second turn. And you put down an Eevee. And instead of putting on a DCE, you put down an Eevee and put on a water energy to the Eevee. You may not have any memory of that at all, but was that something you did regularly where you're just getting a bunch of Glaceon out before you start attacking?
Only against Zoroark, because you can kind of sense when they have a dead hand. Against everything else, you kind of have to start attacking, because their decks usually has normal counts of draw, supporters and stuff. But Zoroark players just take so much liberty with their consistency engine, so when you have ability blocking Trade, a lot of times they just can't do anything.
Yeah. How important is going first in this deck? Because that seems like it might be a downfall of the deck, where if you're not getting that turn 1 Glaceon, you're in trouble. Or especially if you're against a Zoroark deck and you're going second and you don't get it turn 1. How big of a deal is that for you?
I would say that going second is no bigger disadvantage for any other deck that doesn't have a turn 1 attack. So like,
Yeah.
Stuff like Espeon or Buzzwole that have good options going second definitely you're at a disadvantage if you don't go compared to them.
Right.
But relative to stuff like Gardevoir and other decks that don't do anything, like it's kind of you're in the same boat as those type of decks. Um, but going first definitely is a big advantage because like probably like 17 to 20% of the time your opponent's gonna open a Lele out for getting set up and nothing else, and then they just lose the game because of that. So I think it should be looked at more as a bonus advantage for going first and not like a detriment. But in like some of the closer matchups, like Buzzwall, I found whoever went first typically won the match.
Yeah.
And then obviously against like Magnezone and Vikavolt, if you can establish Garbotoxin before they have a chance to even evolve, that can be big. But Magnezone, at least the list people were playing in St. Louis, typically didn't get a turn 2 Magnezone.
Right.
So you usually had a little extra time to get Garbodor set up.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you to go through every single round unless you want to, but are there any like highlight moments from your run or any rounds that you want to talk about that were very indicative of how the deck plays out, or any rounds that were very interesting that you wanted to tell everybody about?
So I started out the day playing a mirror match, and is the Zoroark version. So like I had a normal supporter count and they didn't, so they just kind of did nothing throughout the game while my deck functioned fine. And then I played metal variants for the next 3 rounds, so I thought maybe I might have jumped the gun and maybe the Charlotte meta would be the right meta for Glaceon, and I ended up going 1 and 2 in those matches. I lost to Registeel, Dust main deck, and that's just hard to stop. I lost it 1-2 though, so it's not like terrible, just as Lapras
Right.
and gives you an out against metal decks. And then I beat a Magnezone 2-0, and then I lost to Magnezone 1-2 just as in the 3rd game I dead drew to start. Then I couldn't find a Garbodor to save my life, and then when I did get the Garbodor, I couldn't find a Floatstone or Choice Band to put on it. And then even then, my opponent misplayed really bad to try to give me the game. There's a point where he brought up his Magnezone and attacked with it to knock out my Glaceon. And I had a DC on my Tapu Lele, and he had no Magnemite in play, so if I draw a DC for my Lele, I can knock out the Magnezone and just have complete control, but I play Sycamore and of course Whiff, and then my opponent misplays again, and I set it up where I just hit it, because then if my opponent misplayed and brought up the Dust Mania damage, then I'd be able to potentially take a 3-prize knockout with Glaceon on the Dust Main and the Magnezone, and my opponent did exactly that, and then I played another Sycamore and also didn't draw a DC, so then I just lost. So then I'm 2-2, and I have to start rallying back, and then I played a Volcanion deck, which I guess more of the Ho-Oh thing, and that was super close. Ho-Oh is not weak to water. Glaceon's ability is really good for shutting off Steam Up, forcing them to have a choice band, as well as shutting off Dawn Wings from invading, but that's still super close when they go first and get the Kiawe. Let's see. And then towards then I got a Zoroark deck, which is just the 2 games I went first and set up, I won, and then 1 game I didn't draw well and never got set up, so I lost. And then I had like two like super close matches after that, against Espeon Garb and then Buzzwole Lycanroc, and I won both of them 2-1, and Mewtwo Evo was definitely the MVP in both of those matchups, and those both of those matches went down to the wire, and I just was fortunate to pull both of them off. And then I played Dustin Zimmerman on the stream match, round 9, and in the 2 games where I got set up, Glaceon just shut down his deck, especially since I haven't seen his list, but he had Kukui in it, so I assume he went more for like utility supporters, which made Glaceon really hurt his deck
Right.
more so than some other people's. And then day 2, played against Buzzwole round 1 and lost the coin flip, so I ended up losing that. Then I played Espeon Garb and somehow won it 2-0, but both games I fell behind really far and just like barely managed to run it back. I know like the end of the second game, I thought he got me with a Red Side Parallel City because I set up Polar Spear GX to win it, and I didn't think I could get it, but then I realized I could. I had a Lapras on my bench, and I could just Aqua Patch, attach, and Guzma, and win the game with that. But the Polar Spear got shut out damage-wise, but the Blizzard Burn did the perfect 140 to finish off a Lele. There, I had 30 on it. Then I played Mahone, and he won the coin flip, and he was playing Buzzwole, and game 3, he had like 9 energy on his field on turn 2, and so it was pretty bad, but he had all his strong energies on his Zygarde EX, so I almost pulled out a comeback with Lapras, I think, and pretty much the game came down to after I went down to 2 prizes, whether he had Guzma in hand or not, and he had his 4th Guzma in hand, so I lost that one.
How did he get 9 energies so quickly?
Attaches, max elixirs, and then attacking with Carbink Break.
Oh, okay.
A bunch of energy on the field is pretty bad. Like when you're staring down a field with that much energy, it's like, Mewtwo, please save me. So then the next round I played Vikabulu, and the 2 games I went first. I got Garbotoxin out, and I think turn 2 both games, so that was a pretty easy win. And then the other game, I didn't set up at all and just conceded very early. That's kind of how that matchup goes. And then I played Azul, and he was playing Zoroark, and my deck just drew crap for 3 straight games, and somehow I won one of them. But game 3, I had a pretty good turn 1, I thought, until I played Cynthia or Sycamore, I think, and I whipped the water energy, and then my EV got Guzma the next turn, and that's pretty much it for that game. And then in the last round, I played against another Buzzwole deck, and I won the coin flip this time. And game 1, I had a giant lead, and then I just dead drew off of his late game and a game, and I whiffed a DC for my Mewtwo to attack at one point, which there's just a lot of things that went wrong to lose me a match that I had like a giant lead in, or lose a game that I had a giant lead in, and then game 2, my deck just kind of crapped itself, so I lost.
All right. Well, thank you for this interview. Actually, I do have one more question I forgot about. What does this deck look like in expanded currently? Is it playable?
Um, it should be playable just because of how much Zoroark there's been, and like it gets some better things to do in expanded. Like you have battle compressor, so Aqua Patch becomes a lot more consistent. Um, and then like if you play battle compressor, there's some interesting things you can do with like putting Archies and attacking with like some stage 2 water Pokemon. Like you could put Empoleon in the deck and use that as a backup attacker, for example. Um, Not sure what else changes for expanded. Um, I think Cyrus Prism Star becomes a lot better in the deck just because of how prevalent Zoroark is. Um, but I think it definitely could have problems with a lot of non-Zoroark stuff in expanded though. And I think Lowland Dug Trio should also be really good in expanded, and that should beat the crap out of Glaceon. So that'd be another thing I'd be worried about.
I saw you toting that on something, maybe Twitter. Anyways, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we will have you on the channel again soon. But good luck. Are you going to Costa Mesa or Charlotte?
No,
Nope.
nothing till Madison.
Okay, because Madison's got the money added in.
Yep.
All right, very cool. Any last minute shout outs you want to do?
No.
All right, thank you. Peace.